Tonight on The Buzz, we look at script writing, low-cost audio gear for video, and a heads-up on a technical sea change affecting broadcasters and other large production companies. We start with Maxim Jago, filmmaker, producer, and writer, about the process of creating a script for a feature film. Then Stephen Vitolo, founder of Scriptation, explains how their software simplifies moving your notes from one script revision to the next. Then Dave Willard, manager of online sales and marketing for Azden, showcases how their audio gear is designed for filmmakers and provides suggestions on what to buy when you're starting out to build your traveling audio kit. Then Tony Orme takes us into a brand new SMPTE standard called 2110. This is revolutionizing how broadcasters process media and is already trickling down to production companies around the world. This interview is technically deep, but it is a very important subject. All this, plus James DeRuvo with our weekly doddleNEWS update. The Buzz starts now.
Since the dawn of digital filmmaking.
Authoritative.
One show serves a worldwide network of media professionals.
Current.
Uniting industry experts.
Production.
Filmmakers.
Post-production.
And content creators around the planet.
Distribution.
From the media capital of the world in Los Angeles, California, the Digital Production Buzz goes live now.
Welcome to the Digital Production Buzz, the world's longest-running podcast for the creative content industry, covering media production, post-production, and marketing around the world. Hi, my name is Larry Jordan. Tonight, we take a deep dive into the heart of technology with a look at the new SMPTE 2110 spec. This describes how to manage media using IP technology rather than traditional SDI. While this sounds very technical, it is also highly relevant because it means that producers no longer need to travel to an event to cover it. Instead, they can set up a minimal crew on location and send camera-native signals back to the home studio for production or recording. Fox has already used this technology with the recently concluded World Cup. This has the potential to change the entire process of remote production, as well as revolutionize how media is managed during production. Tony Orme has all the details in our last segment. Before we start, though, I want to invite you to subscribe to our free weekly show newsletter at digitalproductionbuzz.com. Every issue, every week, provides quick links to the different segments on the show, plus articles of interest to filmmakers. Best of all, it's free and comes out every Saturday. And now it's time for our weekly doddleNEWS update with James DeRuvo. Hello, James. Welcome back from Comic-Con.
Well, thank you, Larry. It was a fun week of great news for film fans, including the return of a popular Star Wars series, some great footage of Godzilla, Aquaman, and Wonder Woman, and the Doctor made a house call in San Diego from Great Britain. So it was a lot of fun, and you can read all about it at doddleNEWS.com.
So now you're all rested and ready to go. What's the news?
It's the best working vacation ever. Well, let's go. Nikon officially announced their full-frame mirrorless camera. It isn't often that the rumor mill is spot on, Larry, but in the case of Nikon's new mirrorless camera, it is. With a huge 65mm lens opening, the Nikon FZ full-frame mirrorless camera will likely borrow a lot of features from the D850, including a variant of their homegrown sensor that they put in the D850 last year. It'll come in two different models, a higher-end professional 48-megapixel model and then the consumer-grade 24-megapixel model. Now, both will shoot 4K video with Nikon's flat RAW profile, and it has a new Z-mount lens system, and Nikon assures everyone that they'll have an adapter so that everybody can continue using their legacy lenses. And look for it to come out by the spring of 2019.
Why is a mirrorless camera so important? I mean, DSLRs are still dominant, aren't they?
Well, yeah, but not for very much longer. Reports are showing that mirrorless camera sales and rentals are beginning to outpace DSLRs. It's exciting to see Nikon putting a lot into a higher-end mirrorless model, and if it's half as good as the D850, I think Nikon is sure going to have a winner that could leapfrog them into the higher-end camera game and go head-to-head with the Sony Alpha series. It'll be interesting to see how Canon responds too, and the talk is we're going to know about that pretty soon.
All right, that's Nikon. What's our next story?
Apple has addressed issues with thermal throttling in the new MacBook Pro. Apparently, there was a quote-unquote missing digital key which was causing the MacBook Pro to throttle down almost instantly below its rated specs during higher performance applications like rendering video and game playing and that type of thing. So Apple issued a firmware fix that not only solves the thermal throttling problem, but brings the benchmarks back up to the performance specs in its rated range.
What's your thinking about the fix?
I'm thrilled that Apple responded quickly to it rather than doing the typical song and dance that takes forever like the butterfly keyboard issue had. But my problem is how many times since Tim Cook took over have we heard about bugs that are plaguing the performance of Apple products? I'm not talking about little bugs. I'm talking about major bugs that affect battery performance and processor performance. It's almost expected now. Gone are the days of Apple saying it just works. And it's clear to me that the company is more interested in sales numbers than releasing a product that is as ready as the hype says it is.
Yeah, but James, software is much more complex today than it was, say, 10 years ago. It seems unrealistic to expect almost everything to work perfectly.
Well, that's a fair criticism, I grant you. But you have to admit that we've all been spoiled by Jobsonian expectations. Steve Jobs was obsessed about releasing a product that was perfect, and Tim Cook just isn't that way.
Okay, that's Apple. What's our third story?
And Sony has updated the firmware for the Cine Alta Venice cinema camera, being used for projects ranging from music videos to commercials to features and documentaries. The capable Sony Venice cinema camera got a new firmware update this week that adds dual base ISO that shoots in ISO 500 and 2500 at the same time, and variable frame rate adjustment in one frame increments as it goes, and anamorphic and widescreen formats. There's also a loading of custom LUTs, so the cameraman can create his own LUT and put it into the camera before he actually starts shooting. We've got false color, native E-mount support, and you can actually record in two different formats, one on the camera and one in the recorder at the same time. It's pretty cool. And the dynamic range will remain consistent at around 15 stops no matter where you set the dial. And James Cameron has announced that because of these new features, he's going to be shooting all four of his long-awaited Avatar sequels using the 4K Cine Alta Venice camera.
James, this is a firmware upgrade for an existing camera. What's the news here that's relevant for the rest of us?
The real story here is not that Sony has added all these new features. They do that all the time. But what they're doing is they're listening to veteran filmmakers and incorporating their suggestions into the next version of their firmware. But now they're listening to filmmakers, and Cameron goes as far as to say that Sony will bet the farm on a new feature from a seasoned filmmaker's suggestion because they know where the camera can go.
Okay, that's Sony. By the way, James, we had a social media cautionary tale this week. What happened with James Gunn?
Well, director James Gunn, he's the director of Guardians of the Guardians of the Galaxy series. He got fired from Disney last week because of some controversial tweets that he wrote, 8 years ago. It was a long time ago when Gunn was practically a different person. It was before he was working for Disney. He was more edgier back then, and he would just vomit out things on Twitter that nobody would ever say. A lot of it had to do with children. And so Disney immediately, within 24 hours of these tweets hitting the news, Disney just fired him. And it's causing a lot of filmmakers to start to go into their Twitter feeds and delete anything at all that could be considered controversial. Rian Johnson, the director of Star Wars, this week deleted 20,000 tweets out of his account just because he just doesn't want to have to deal with what James Gunn is going through.
James, those are our top stories for this week. What other stories are you following?
Other stories we're following, cord cutting continues to rise, but cable is slowing it down by bringing Netflix into their channel lineup. We've got complete coverage of San Diego Comic-Con, and there's one tool that every cameraman needs in their kit. Can you guess what it is?
Tripod.
Close. The monopod. That's what we're working on. What's tonight's show about, Larry?
Tonight, we are covering a variety of subjects, but our first two interviews are especially interesting because they're talking about scripting.
As in writing a script?
As in writing a script. Maxim Jago walks us through the process of creating a script for a feature film. Then Steve Vitolo showcases a very new technology that simplifies the huge hassle of dealing with script revisions. We've got some very cool interviews tonight. And James, for people that want to keep track not only of what we're doing on The Buzz, but what's happening in the industry, where can they go on the web?
All these stories and more can be found at doddleNEWS.com.
And James DeRuvo is the editor-in-chief of doddleNEWS.com and joins us every week. See you next Thursday.
See you next Thursday.
Here's another website I want to introduce you to, doddleNEWS.com. DoddleNEWS gives you a portal into the broadcast, video, and film industries. It's a leading online resource presenting news, reviews, and products for the film and video industry. DoddleNEWS also offers a resource guide and crew management platform specifically designed for production. These digital call sheets, along with their app, directory, and premium listings, provide in-depth organizational tools for busy production professionals. DoddleNEWS is a part of the Thalo Arts community, a worldwide community of artists, filmmakers, and storytellers. From photography to filmmaking, performing arts to fine arts, and everything in between, Thalo is filled with resources you need to succeed. Whether you want the latest industry news, need to network with other creative professionals, or require state-of-the-art online tools to manage your next project, there's only one place to go, doddleNEWS.com. Maxim Jago is a film director, screenwriter, and author who splits his time between filmmaking and speaking as a futurist, especially at events celebrating creativity. Hello, Maxim. Welcome back.
Hello there. It's great to be back with you.
It's always fun to talk to you, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. Today, we're going to be looking at a variety of things in the show, but our first two interviews, yourself and the guy that follows you, are looking at scripting. So I want you to take your film director hat off for a moment and put your screenwriting hat on.
Absolutely.
And tell us about the kinds of scripts that you've written.
Well, I'm a fiction guy, so I've written a couple of feature-length scripts, mapped out a couple of others, and written a few shorts.
So what's involved in the process of writing a script?
Some people would say that you should begin by bleeding onto the page. I think, for me, I worked out early on that the trick would be to work out what the key point of the story was. What's the obstacle that's overcome? What's the message? What is it really about? Begin with that, because that becomes your touchstone throughout the writing process. What you're writing either relates to that concept or that idea, or it doesn't, and you have to make sure that you're clear. Because they say that for a feature film project, you really just play around with one theme. With shorts, you can do anything you like, whenever you want. People expect it to be abbreviated. So I kind of do a painting by numbers system where I start with the core concept. Then I break that down into, usually the three main acts. What's the setup? What's the bulk of the story? What's the resolution? And then I break those down into, let's say, key turning points in the plot. And then it's a question of breaking those key turning points into specific scenes, which could be as little as you see the person get in a car and drive away. And then it's painting by numbers. You know exactly what you need to write. You can see how it all connects together. And I think your goal is to take the audience on a journey that is both emotional and intellectual. They're learning something about themselves or their world while taking this emotional voyage.
So you're very much starting at a high level, sketching out the big picture and not really getting into the specific words until you've got the whole thing pretty well outlined.
That's the theoretical principle. I think in practice, my father was a poet. He had a number of poems published in anthologies in the UK, and he'd be at the bus stop and he'd have a thought for some little phrase to put in a poem, and he'd write it on the back of a cigarette packet or something, and then he'd get back and jot it down on paper, put it in a competition, and the next thing you know, it's published. And certainly what I found is that there will be moments, there are just moments. It could be 4 o'clock in the morning, you wake up in bed and you think, that's it, that's the scene, that's the dialogue. Or you could be in the middle of conversation with somebody. So what I end up with is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of notes to myself. And it's a little private relationship where I will be providing myself later, the future me, with ideas and concepts and inspiration. And sometimes it'll just be one line of dialogue that I know is perfect. But I've discovered over the years that in that moment of inspiration, that one line of dialogue comes with a sentiment and a mood and an atmosphere that may be missing from the memory when you read the dialogue and you realize this is terrible, this doesn't work at all. So what I've learned is to put a bit more of the feeling, a bit more of the why. When I write that note down about a piece of dialogue, I'll write a little note about this has happened and they're feeling this way about it, and that's why they say the line. And that helps me to recapture the mood and atmosphere of the inspiration and not just the words. So I found that to be very helpful. One of the biggest challenges, I think, for writers is ensuring that the lines of dialogue are understood in the way that they're intended. And I find one of the greatest challenges in that area is getting the reader to trust you, that you meant those words to be said. Because very often people will read scripts, they just think, oh, you're probably not a very good writer because you haven't won an Oscar. And if I don't get that line of dialogue, it's probably just badly written. You have to find a way to convince the reader early on that you do know what you're doing and there are reasons for this. Never a problem with actors. They know that they need to find a way to do it and bring it to life.
Now that we've got the overall process figured out, let's shift gears into what software you use to bring those words from your mind into reality. What have you looked at?
Over the years, I've tried out a few different options. Celtics is very popular, very low cost, if not free in it. And it has a lot of presets in it, although I found it doesn't get out of the way as much as Final Draft. You can get templates for Word. You can have keyboard shortcuts with macros to automate formatting and that kind of thing. But ultimately, and Adobe Story, I'm a big fan of Adobe Story. And Adobe have made a big fuss about the scheduling and project management functionality of Story. But for me, what really sets it apart is that it's giving you properly laid out. I'm a fiction guy, right? So I want a properly laid out film script format. And that's very important because a page of text with that formatting averages a minute of screen time. And that's important for knowing how long the thing's going to be. So ultimately, I ended up with Final Draft. And the reason I use Final Draft is not because of any of it's got functionality where you can map out your project and you can get scene headings and character reports. The real reason I use Final Draft is that it gets out of the way when I'm writing. If you begin typing in Final Draft, it presumes that you intend to write a scene heading, and it remembers the names of the scenes that you enter. And when you press carriage return, it knows that you're going to be writing descriptive text now. And so it formats everything for descriptive text. Press carriage return and then the tab key, and it knows that you want to write a character name. Press carriage return again, and now it knows that you want to write dialogue. So once you learn 3 or 4 little bits of keyboard magic, and it really is just 3 or 4, you are flying through the writing process, and you know that it's correct. You know that the formatting is as it should be. And I found that to be very helpful because when you're writing, you don't want to be dealing with technology. You want to be in a state of flow.
How do you handle revisions? Or are your scripts perfect as soon as you've drafted them?
I'm not bad at first drafts, and I'm terrible at revisions. I find running screaming into the hills to be the best solution. In a studio, there's a system in place usually where you have specific numbering for inserted pages. So you might well strike out content and insert a page. And the reason you insert the page is to make sure that you can manage the project. So you know that this is new content and it's added, whether or not you're removing old content. So you have all these multiple codes for different kinds of inserted content and maybe use a color code. For me, that's something that you would do when you get into pre-production. As an indie filmmaker, I really just want to work and work and work the script until I'm happy with it. And ultimately, I'm often reminded when working on scripts of the old Leonardo da Vinci quote, which I'll misquote now, where I think we've spoken about this before, that true art is never completed, only abandoned. And what I found with scripts is that very often I'll come back to a bit of a script and I'll read it and I'll think, this is rubbish. This is no good. I don't know why I thought this was okay. But gradually over time, that reaction to my own work is replaced with a feeling of, it's okay. It's not bad. And I think when you reach a point where the entire script invokes a feeling of, it's okay, it's probably, you're done, right? When you're reading it and you find yourself, even though it's your own work, you find yourself turning the page and wanting to look at the next page. And for me, I think that an absolutely critical component of feedback from a film script is, was it a page turner? Did you want to read the next page? Were you keen to know what happens next? And people don't talk about that very often. They talk about structure and character development. And ultimately, those are rules, I think, that are there to help you make sure that you engage your audience and that you understand the craft of storytelling. But ultimately, if you don't care what happens next, it's not going to make any difference. And there are a lot of reasons why you would care or not care. And one of them is, for example, how critical it is that you can empathize with the protagonist. As they say, you're going to spend a couple of hours with them. You might as well like them.
Maxim, when a script is done, how do you distribute it?
I invariably send it out as a PDF. It's an Acrobat PDF shared with people. I rarely want anyone to have access to the original document. I don't want them to change it. How
easy is it to let go of a script when you're done with it?
Yeah, they're like children, aren't they? I'm lucky because I'm a writer-director, and so I transitioned from being the writer to, in my view, the director has total control. And so as a director, when I take on somebody else's script, it is my script now, and I get to make whatever changes I want. And I would prefer the writer to make those changes, but if they're not available, I will make them. And that's how I feel about it. And the challenge, I think, for me is switching hats. But which I've worked out how to do over the years, that you have to let go of the original concept that you had in mind. It's a bit like shooting a documentary, actually. You go out with something in mind and you discover something totally different. And I think in the course of making a film, a script's not a blueprint for a film. It's more like a recipe where you might discover, I haven't got any herbs de Provence, but I do have some oregano. Let's give it a shot. You discover, you'll do the casting process and you'll realize, the character I had in mind is not as amazing as the character you have just shown me. And from now on, we're going to go with your character. I'm casting you and we're going to rewrite as necessary. You discover a different look. The music changes. Everything changes. It's a collaborative, symphonic, beautiful crowd intelligence journey creating a film. And the script is really more inspiration than a command from on high.
For people that want more information about the projects you're working on and yourself, where can they go on the web?
I must update it, but MaximJago.com, my website, is a safe bet. I'm on Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn and all of that as well. Same thing, Maxim Jago.
That's MaximJago, MaximJago.com. And Maxim, as always, it's fun chatting with you. Thanks for spending the time.
Likewise. Thank you, Larry.
Stephen Vitolo is the CEO and founder of Scriptation. He's been a script coordinator for scripted series at ABC, CBS, NBC, and Showtime. And he's worked in production at Fox and FX, Disney Channel, Comedy Central, the CW, MTV, VH1, Academy Awards, anything that uses a script. Hello, Steve. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Larry. Appreciate it.
Steve, we just heard from Maxim Jago talking about the process of scripting. But part of that process of scripting is revisions, which is where your company fits in. Tell me about what Scriptation is.
Scriptation is a PDF annotation app. PDF annotation has been around for a while. Adobe, if you've been using Adobe, you've done PDF annotation. So it's an app that lets you annotate your scripts. And then because you work in film and television, so you get a lot of script revisions. So what we can do is we can take all of your digital annotations from one draft of a script and intelligently transfer them into the next draft of a script, and so on and so forth. So it saves people a lot of time on the production process, as they don't have to worry about collating pages and recopying their notes.
Well, I'm going to talk about this intelligent transfer in just a minute, but before we do, why did you decide to build a company around this?
I worked as a script coordinator for a number of years on television shows. I've worked on Blackish. I've worked on Hot in Cleveland. At the end of 2013, I was working on a pilot. It was kind of a weird production schedule where we had 2 weeks between the table read and when we started shooting. And every single night we were putting out a full 50-page draft of a script. So there were 10 plus revisions of that draft, and it wasn't to the point where the script was locked and you're just putting out 5 pages. You're putting out a full draft. It was crazy just to everyone that was working that, one, we were wasting all this paper and we were wasting all this productivity time and making all your notes on one draft and then tossing it. So yeah, that's when I thought there had to be a better way. And going digital was one thing, but then how do you mark up your document digitally? And then what happens to the next draft, which happens so often in television and film. That's kind of how we started. And today we're used on a bunch of different shows, and it's really cool.
All right. Well, let's say that I've got a draft of a script, and in order for Scriptation to work, I have to have that draft as a PDF.
Correct. Yes.
So I've got it as a PDF, and I mark it up. And then I get a new version of the draft, and they delete pages 2, 3, and 17. How do you intelligently transfer my notes so they stay in sync?
Yeah, good question. Because even in that scenario, I mean, whether you're in an unlocked script or a locked script, it doesn't matter. What we do is we analyze the text. So we're not looking at scene numbers or, scene headings or characters or anything like that. We're straight up just looking at the text. We're analyzing the text. We're comparing the two documents. And if there's something like Bob goes to the grocery store and that's at the bottom of page 3 and is now on the top of page 4 or middle or page 5, we know that that's where that text is. So if you've highlighted that line, when you transfer the notes, then that line will be highlighted on page 5 of the next draft.
How long does this comparison take?
It's really fast. It depends on the device that you have. So if you've got the newer iPads, it also depends on the amount of annotations that you have. But in general, the amount for what I do, and I mark scripts up as a writer, and I'm not putting a ton of photos, my note transfer takes about 10 seconds. If you're a director, we've had a director that has literally had over 2,000 annotations. That could take, 30 seconds to a minute, but still, that's pretty fast compared to the old method. You can't even do that just putting in the script pages. That's going to take you 5 minutes.
What's the program cost?
So the program is $9.99. It's on iOS and Windows. You can get it in the iOS App Store and the Windows App Store. It's a one-time fee. We keep updating it. We're going to have some pro features eventually that could potentially be a monthly charge. We get a lot of feature requests from different departments, so we want to do that. So we do plan on kind of making more advanced features for script supervisors and assistant directors and sound mixers and writers going forward.
I was on the App Store website reading some of the reviews, and one of the people said they were very, very impressed with your support. What are common support questions? What do people ask the most?
It's really a wide range. Some people ask how to get a document into the app. Some people ask how to use an annotation tool. We find that there are two types of highlighting. You can highlight directly over the text where it picks up the text, or you can sort of have a large marker highlight. And some people are using that instead of the other way, and the other way is much better. But yeah, they could be as basic as how do you use this to how do you insert pages and how do you create size, which is kind of a more advanced feature. But yeah, it's a broad range. And we also get a lot of people who haven't used the app and is like, I heard about this. Can it do X, Y, and Z? Or, I'm a live event person. I know this is for scripted TV. Does it work for live events? And yes, it does. I'm guessing saying it is great support because I'm the one answering the questions. It's not coming from a tech support person. It's in the signature. It says Steve Vitolo, CEO and founder of Scriptation. So, we're not a giant company, or I could still field some of the questions, and it's cool that people are emailing even before, during, and while they're using the app.
My background is in live directing, and I was just thinking about this. I would always mark up my script for live. Is it possible for me to print out the script with the annotations? Because there's a level of security in holding a printed script in your hand as the world is collapsing around you.
Sure. Yeah, you can definitely do that. Most annotations will show up. Some won't. So, for example, if you highlight a line and then a lot of people like to put a note inside their highlight, that probably isn't going to look as pretty. But if it's something where you wanted to print out the document, there are certain ways and certain annotations that you'll avoid and some that you'll sort of hang on to. But I understand that people need to have that security, and we definitely allow for that.
My notes indicate that you may be working on a new project. Is that true?
Yeah, so we have this app that anyone could download in the App Store, whether you're in film, at any level. You can have a theatrical director, you can have, Spielberg using it, or you can have a production assistant using it. So anyone could get the app. And what we are now building out it's called Scriptation Studio. And it really solves the problem of security, which a lot of studios and productions are really concerned about. And what we provide with Scriptation Studio is an end-to-end secure version of Scriptation, where a document gets uploaded and actually sent out via a deep link and a push notification. So there's no email attachments. No one could accidentally get it. You could download it on your device. It's encrypted. We have two-factor authentication just to be able to use it. We even have screenshot protection, where if the user takes a screenshot of the document, the admin will be alerted that so-and-so has taken a screenshot of the document, which is somewhat creepy, admittedly, but it's also a good security measure for the admins to know that this is something that shouldn't be shared and you shouldn't be doing that.
So it doesn't prevent the screenshot, it notifies an admin that the screenshot was taken.
Yeah, and they actually can see the screenshot that was taken.
Oh my goodness.
We tell the users that's going to happen, so they should know. The reason why we kind of did this was because we were on a production that, unbeknownst to me, was using Scriptation. They're one of the biggest TV shows around right now, and they were looking for a way to secure their documents. So that's kind of how we started developing Scriptation Studio, and they're doing a thing that is kind of insane to me, which is they're manually putting the PDFs on the device. They're giving out the device, and then they're taking the device back at the end of the day, which I'm sure there's some poor PA that has to do that. Now they can keep their device with them, and the document is going to be secured the entire way through. And if somebody, does something bad and they kick that person off the show, then the admin can send a little notification to them and immediately shut down access to using Scriptation. So there's a lot of cool things for the studio, and for the users, we are giving them something with this, which is they can collaborate in a very cool way. They can share annotations with each other on the document. So if you wanted to share your annotations with them, there could be basically a layer where you say, these are my annotations, these are another person in my department's annotations. You could kind of toggle back and forth. So it's kind of a cool collaboration thing that you could only do with Scriptation Studio.
When are you planning to release it?
Hopefully next month. We're actually doing demos right now with a few different studios. We're hoping that it'll be completed mid-August.
I will keep my fingers crossed for you. And for people who want more information about Scriptation and what's available today, where can they go on the web?
Go to Scriptation.com. We're also updating our website. That'll be done in a few weeks too, and it's going to have all the information on Scriptation and Scriptation Studio there.
That website is SCRIPT, Script, ATION, Scriptation.com. And Stephen Vitolo is the CEO and founder of Scriptation. And Steve, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Larry. I really appreciate it.
Dave Willard is the manager for online sales and marketing for Azden, which is a Japanese electronics manufacturer that specializes in audio solutions for video creators. Dave has over 15 years' experience working in audio production, including radio and TV commercials, live sound, and music recording. Plus, he's an active guitar player. Hello, Dave. Welcome.
Hello, Larry.
Thanks for taking the time to join us, because I know we're interrupting you at a trade show, so we're grateful to have you here. How would you describe Azden?
We were an electronics manufacturer. We make microphones, wireless, and audio mixers, and we specialize in audio solutions for video and filmmakers.
Why the specialization?
It's been something that the company's been focused on for a long time, and it is an area of expertise that they become well known in. So that's what they're sticking with.
What's your role with the company?
My role is manager of online sales and marketing. So I work in the digital space online quite a bit, just trying to promote the products in any way I can.
I've seen Azden at a number of trade shows and stop by your booth frequently. But there's also lots of other good audio manufacturers. Why should we consider Azden products?
Because we actually offer a great value in comparison to some of our competitors. So we make great sounding equipment, and you're not going to find that it's as expensive as some of our competitors are. You get a big bang for your buck with our equipment. We do stand behind our reputation as a company and the build quality of our products. And a lot of our products will come with a 10-year warranty. And we do pride ourselves in service.
So the big benefit that Azden provides is the lower price?
I would say the affordable price. We do have some microphones and wireless systems that are very affordable and accessible for the entry-level type of user. When you're ready to move on and upgrade, we have the products for that too.
Well, let's just talk about the products for a moment. What are some of the more popular products that you have?
Our on-camera video microphones, in that realm, our most popular product is the SMX30. So that particular microphone actually can do stereo and mono in one mic. There's a mono shotgun, which means it's directional and can pick up dialogue very well and keep out the extraneous noise. But you can flip a switch in the back and turn it into a stereo microphone on the fly. So stereo would be good for situations where maybe you're shooting a musical performance or some kind of action scene where you want to have the stereo image in with your film.
Okay.
And then as far as wireless goes, one of the more popular products now is the Pro XD wireless system. That's a digital wireless system. It's a wireless lavalier, and it's very affordable, priced at $199. And people really like that because of its small size and the fact that it comes with rechargeable lithium-ion batteries installed.
With the recent FCC ruling shifting wireless spectrum, I assume that your gear is compatible with the new spectrum?
Yes. There is one wireless system that was affected. That was more or less for TV stations and broadcasters. That's going to be revamped. But as far as our other wireless products, they weren't affected. The Pro XD that I mentioned before is in the digital space, so that's not even an issue. And then our VHF is also fine. Our 1U HF system was not affected because it was below the 600 megahertz range.
One of the things you mentioned is that you appeal especially to new videographers and people just getting started. There are so many audio choices out there, not just from Azden, but from all the different manufacturers. What questions should they be asking you to determine what microphone to get for their first project?
Depending on what you're shooting, I think if you have only the money for one particular microphone, figure out if you want to do an on-camera microphone or if you want to do a wireless system. So these different types of situations, would affect whether or not you go with one or the other. Wireless lav, obviously you need the time to be able to mic up somebody. That can give you some really good sound because the lavalier is always so close to the speaking subject. But in situations where maybe you don't have the time to actually lav someone up, you might want to go with the on-camera mic. That's kind of the more run and gun situation where you're going from location to location and you need to be kind of in the moment and have something ready to capture good audio when you're ready to film.
Okay, so let's just say that I want to get a lavalier. Are all of your lavaliers the same, or are they different? And how do I decide which of the lavaliers to get?
That depends on, it's probably the price point. So if you're entry level, you might be looking at our WLX Pro Plus I system, which is the most affordable one that we do make. It retails around $165 right now. And that's a simple system to operate. It's a VHF system. It comes with 2 different frequencies, so it's not a lot of setup involved. So very easy to use and very affordable. If you needed something more advanced, our UHF systems might be the way to go, where they allow you to have up to 188 different frequencies to choose from. That's the nature of UHF. We can actually allow you to change frequencies and give you more options in that way.
Is the audio quality the same and I'm just getting more features as I spend more money, or are you changing the capsules and the microphones themselves?
Well, the audio quality will be a little bit better on UHF. That's more or less to do with the electronics of the equipment. One of our UHF systems, you're getting higher quality electronics, so just a higher quality sound in general. You get more features. The lavaliers, you will get a better quality lavalier with the UHF system versus the VHF system.
But the capsules are the same?
How do you mean, in terms of polar pattern?
Well, in terms of the actual pickup sensor that picks up the audio, are you using the same microphone in all your mics?
Not in all of them. We actually have a pretty broad range of lavaliers that are available. The WLX Pro Plus I system I mentioned before, the lavalier that comes with that is not as high quality as the one that would come with a UHF system, like our 310 LT. So in that case, you are getting a better, higher quality mic capsule on your lavalier.
Does it make a difference if we're miking up men or women or different usage of the mic?
Between men and women, no. Different uses. You could kind of get creative with a lavalier. They are omnidirectional, and at least most of ours are. Sometimes that's helpful because we've had wedding videographers that will mic up the groom, but the microphone's sensitive enough to pick up the voice of the bride and the person who's running the ceremony as well. So you can kind of get everything with that one lavalier in that kind of situation.
If I was new to shooting, what audio would you recommend as a starter kit? What should I get?
I would say at least get a on-camera microphone, because we all know that the microphones built into the cameras are not very good. So you right off the bat, you won't have to spend a lot of money to dramatically improve the audio that you can capture. If you're just starting and you've got a low budget, I would recommend either our SMX10 microphone, which is a stereo microphone. That retails for $85. Or you can go with the SGM 990 Plus I microphone. That's a shotgun mono microphone, and that goes for $95. In addition, with that mic, you can use it with your cameras, but also it is compatible with phones and tablets.
And for people who want more information, where can they go on the web?
You can visit us at Azden.com, where you can check out all of the products I was talking about and more. That
website is AZDEN, Azden.com, and Dave Willard is the manager of online sales and marketing for Azden. And Dave, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Larry.
I want to introduce you to a new website, Thalo.com. Thalo is an artist community and networking site for creative people to connect, be inspired, and showcase their creativity. Thalo.com features content from around the world with a global perspective on all things creative. Thalo is the place for creative folks to learn, collaborate, market, and sell their works. Thalo is a part of Thalo Arts, a worldwide community of artists, filmmakers, and storytellers. From photography to filmmaking, performing arts to fine arts, and everything in between, Thalo is filled with the resources you need to succeed. Visit Thalo.com and discover how their community can help you connect, learn, and succeed. That's Thalo.com. Tony Orme is the founder of Orme Solutions Limited, a London-based firm. He's a broadcast engineer, industry commentator, and writer specializing in IP migration and related technologies. Based on the knowledge he gained during his operational work at the BBC, Tony now applies these skills to help others successfully migrate from SDI to IP-based media. Hello, Tony. Welcome.
Hello.
Why did you decide, after all those years at the BBC and in research, why did you decide to start your company?
I wanted to explore IP more. The last job I had was getting a bunch of broadcast engineers and IT engineers to work together and then moving everything into the cloud. I enjoyed the project so much I thought I'd do more of that myself.
In my introduction, I said that you're helping people migrate from an SDI to an IP workflow. What does that mean, and why would anybody care?
The broadcasters have been using digital SDI and AES and MADI for best part of 20 years. And it's a very well-defined format which has stood the test of time. But one of the disadvantages of its format is it's very rigid. For example, when we used standard definition video distribution in the US and in Europe, we could use 270 megabits distribution in SDI, and that was fine. But then when we moved to HD, we had to look at replacing complete parts of the infrastructure, which was a massive capital investment for broadcasters. And then when the broadcasters wanted to move from HD interlace to HD progressive, they again had to look at replacing big parts of their infrastructure, because all the old HD interlaced infrastructure wasn't always compatible with the HD progressive infrastructure. And now we're looking at UHD, possibly 4K and 8K. The SDI infrastructures are just getting really out of hand. So before you could transmit a single HD signal down one cable, but now with UHD and 4K, you have to use 4 cables. So the infrastructures are getting very, very complicated. Now, what IP brings us is the ability to make the systems more flexible. Before, instead of having one SDI signal going down one cable, we can have multiple broadcast signals going down IP cables and IP infrastructures. And it becomes scalable as well. It makes the whole change and the whole migration much simpler, and the whole system is more flexible and scalable.
Well, the benefits to switching from SDI, which is a very fixed format, to IP, which, as you say, is more flexible, are obvious as you start to explain them, but there's got to be some downsides, and security is the first one that comes to mind.
Yeah, this is a big concern. I mean, the beauty of SDI is you know when somebody's hacked your network because they've got a pair of wire cutters in their hand. The problem with IP is you're quite right, somebody could be hacking into your network from the other side of the planet and you might not know about it. So there are a lot of things you have to do to be able to make IP secure. But what it means is there's a lot more collaboration now between the traditional broadcast engineers and the IT/network engineers within broadcast facilities, purely to make the systems flexible, reliable, and, as you say, very secure.
Your work has been primarily focused on broadcasters, but is there application to smaller groups, say production houses, or where teams of people are working together shifting from an SDI to an IP workflow, or is this still the domain of those with deep pockets?
It started off that way. A lot of the big projects that have gone on are with what I call the blue chip companies. So they are companies which have been able to completely rebuild their infrastructure. So that was the case up till recently. What we're finding is a lot of post houses are benefiting from this. So a company that is making adverts, for instance, that have to then be distributed to broadcasters throughout the country. In the old days, when I first started working in television, that involved having to transfer the advert onto a piece of videotape and then either distributing that videotape throughout the country or playing it over the lines through some sort of distribution network, dedicated broadcast distribution network, which meant the whole system was extremely slow and tiresome. But with IP, post houses can now transfer their ads to broadcasters within seconds. And there is also the benefit of audit trails. So if you use a dedicated IP infrastructure which has been properly built by the broadcaster, they know exactly when you've uploaded your media content, and they know who's uploaded it, where and when. So there's this big audit trail as well, which also helps with security, because Going back to security, that's an interesting point in that when we say security, we instantly think about somebody hacking into the network. But if you think about the old days of security, when you have pieces of videotape, actual cassettes, nobody really knew where they were from time to time. I remember walking through edit suites and seeing just cassettes and tapes stacked to the ceiling, and they were supposed to be in a library, but people just hadn't got round to putting them back. So that was an extremely insecure system, and nobody really batted an eyelid about it. Nobody worried too much about it. With IP, we have a lot of opportunity to improve the efficiencies and the workflows and really clean our act up. So, we no longer have tapes lying around on edit floors, but we know exactly where media assets are within the system, because these complex tracking systems can work out where everything is.
One of the big challenges that broadcasters face is the competition from OTT networks like Netflix and Amazon.
Yeah.
Does shifting to IP enable them to compete better in this environment?
It does in terms of distribution. For instance, live broadcasting is the holy grail of broadcasting, because the amount of money broadcasters can make from live events is far higher than they can make from OTT. So everybody is trying to get to live distribution. Using IP gives you a whole load of networks that weren't available to you in the old SDI and the old broadcasting formats. So instead of having to transmit over satellite or terrestrial RF or through dedicated cable networks, you can now pipe content directly to people's homes, and even more importantly, to their handheld devices. So a lot of young people now want to watch television when they want, how they want, and where they want. And that involves either watching it on their cell phone, or watching it on their iPad, or watching it on the big screen at home. But it opens up that whole genre of distribution and viewing to those broadcasters.
There's a new spec called ST2110.
Yeah.
What does this refer to?
Well, this is a SMPTE specification, Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers. They have worked out how to make television work properly in IP. Before we had ST2110, there was another standard called ST2022. That works, that was very good, but it was very wasteful of bandwidth. And what 2110 did was it did away with needing to store this sync information. So we instantly got back 15 or 20% bandwidth by using 2110. It was also the advantage of that the timing model changed. And essentially that means each packet of data, each video packet or audio packet or metadata packet, has an individual unique timestamp associated with it, which means that we can then process the audio and the video and the metadata independently of each other. And this is the really big groundbreaking thing of 2110, because it means that we no longer have to process the audio and video together within the same studio, and even the metadata. So if we use the example of HDR, to make HDR work properly, we need frame accurate metadata, which is generated by the camera. And in traditional SDI systems, that data had to be embedded within the SDI signal, which made the workflow extremely complex, especially when you had to go through vision switches and other video processing equipment, because all that data was either stripped off and lost, or we started to get synchronization errors like we did with lip sync errors. But what 2110 does is, because as this data comes out of the camera, it is stamped with a timestamp, which is reference to the video frame, and also any audio that's been generated by the microphones and the sound department. Everything is tied together, and these timestamps are absolutely unique. So what I can go and do is I can then take my HDR metadata, I can go and process it in the cloud, and then I can combine it back with a video just before transmission. And I can do the same with audio as well. So I don't necessarily have to process all the audio within the studio. And because the timestamps are all synchronized and unique, then we can join the video, the audio, and the metadata and subtitles all together within the transmission facility. So it's starting to open up a whole new way of working for production houses, and there's going to be many, many opportunities available.
I remember when I first learned about the front porch and back porch, and the first time I worked with a frame sync, and now we no longer need any of that.
that's that's a very moot point. This is very new. I mean, 2110 was released in the beginning of this year, January, February this year. We're still working through a lot of the problems, and we will do for many, many years to come. There are lots of challenges ahead. And so one of the big gains for this is for remote working. So if you have a football stadium and then you want to do an outside broadcast from there back to your studio, traditionally you'd send an outside broadcast crew there and a big truck. But with 2110, instead of having the production crew on site, what we do is we stream all the video and audio back over IP networks into the studio, and that could be a local studio, and then we mix the program from the studio. So you no longer need to have the crew at the remote site. Although it's technically possible and people are managing to get all that audio and video streams back into the studio, the timing is the critical bit. And we're having to work out ways of now synchronizing all that information and timing and synchronizing the time generators at both the remote side at the stadium and back at the studio as well. So eventually we will get rid of synchronizers and lip sync will be a thing of the past. But we're going through a transition phase at the moment where we're trying to work out solutions to these problems.
2110 really can change the world, can it? I mean, it's a significant shift.
It is. For instance, the remote working, Fox have done a lot with this. There's a lot happening in the US with Fox. I think in the World Cup games, they had their remote streaming all the way back from the cameras and microphones coming out of the stadiums back to their studios in LA. And so the number of people that had to be on location was greatly reduced. So you can imagine the costs have been slashed. And also, it's a lot more reliable. It's a much easier way of working.
Cool stuff. Tony, for people who want more information, where can they go on the web to learn about your company?
If you go to ormesolutions.com, that's ORME solutions.com, and you'll find all the information on there about various projects I've worked on and a bit about me as well.
Tony Orme is the founder of Orme Solutions. Their website is ormesolutions.com. And Tony, thanks for sharing your time with us. This has been fascinating.
Thank you.
You know, I've been thinking a lot about Tony Orme's interview since I recorded it yesterday. This shift from SDI to IP media workflows has the potential to affect almost all of us. Traditionally, if an event was happening outside the studio, we needed to pack up all of our gear and crew and then travel to cover it. That's because all the equipment, cabling, and protocols required everything to be in one location and directly connected. For live events, this was a very expensive proposition, which meant that only large events could justify the cost. Moving media via IP rather than SDI means that we can send a signal around the world as easily as from one production truck to another. Fox proved this with their recent World Cup coverage. The cameras were in Russia, but the control room was in Los Angeles. Tony went even further. Imagine a live event in, say, London with audio mixing done in Nashville, program assembly completed in Los Angeles, and originating out of New York. Think of all the crew that wouldn't need to travel, or the technical resources that could be accessed without having to bring extra trucks, or the fact that much smaller events could now be covered without requiring large budgets. And this technology extends beyond live broadcasts like sports or news. Production houses can use artists without requiring they be in the facility. Even more than today, production teams can be located across the world, collaborating on the same project. As with any new technology, there are still issues. In this case, security, internet bandwidth, and the costs of replacing old technology with new. These are still important. And not all of us will benefit from this new standard. But this new 2110 spec means that major changes are coming in how we acquire and process our media, especially for larger teams. And that gives me something to think about. I want to thank our guests this week, filmmaker Maxim Jago, Stephen Vitolo with Scriptation, Dave Willard with Azden, Tony Orme with Orme Solutions and James DeRuvo with doddleNEWS.com. There's a lot of history in our industry, and it's all posted to our website at digitalproductionbuzz.com. Here you'll find thousands of interviews, all online and all available to you today. And remember to sign up for our free weekly show newsletter that comes out every Saturday. Talk with us on Twitter at DPBuzz and Facebook at digitalproductionbuzz.com. Our theme music is composed by Nathan Doogie Turner with additional music provided by smartsound.com. Our producer is Debbie Price. My name is Larry Jordan, and thanks for listening to the Digital Production Buzz. The Digital Production Buzz is copyright 2018 by Thalo LLC.